We are staying in the Word together and going over Matthew chapter 10. So I'm going to get set up real quick and give people time who want to join live. And let's see, then logging on so I can see comments for this live video, I guess you'd say. So, see, there's a couple of you online already. Hey, I'm gonna, oops, wrong way. Okay. Hello, Michaela. Who else is on? I can just see Michaela, but I see several people on. Hello, everyone. Going now and just sharing the link. Anyone doing anything fun today? Anything exciting going on over the weekend? We're looking at beach baptism. We have a beach baptism planned Sunday. We're going to start hanging out at 4 o'clock, I think, and then baptism is at 6. But we're not sure. We have to check on the red tide. So I'm going to be looking more into that tonight and tomorrow and seeing if we need to postpone it or whatnot. Does it change the day we're leaving? Well, that's okay. Even if we don't reschedule, Michaela will be having more throughout the summer. So we'll get you baptized soon. Don't even worry. All right, now Matthew chapter 10, verses 1 through 4. Jesus called his 12 disciples to him and gave them authority to drive out impure spirits and heal every disease and sickness. These are the names of the 12 apostles. First, Simon, who is called Peter, and his brother Andrew. James, son of Zebedee, and his brother John. Philip and Bartholomew. Thomas and Matthew, the tax collector. James, son of Alphaeus, and Thaddeus. Simon the Zealot, and Judas Iscariot, who betrayed him. Looking at these scriptures, the main feature of this list is its diversity. Jesus chose his disciples from all types of varieties of different backgrounds and life experiences. About the only thing they had in common, many of them, were that they were following Jesus. Some were fishermen, of course, but so they had a little bit more in common, those that were fishermen, but not all of them were fishermen. But what they do have in common also was it seems that none of them were privileged or from backgrounds of high status. Matthew was a tax collector, so he probably did have money, but it wasn't a high status position. He was pretty hated. Jesus not only called the 12, he also gave them power to do what he had called them to do. The same principle holds true today. When we come to the Lord and we follow him, he equips us. When we throw our lives into his, right, into his purpose, his calling, learning what he has for us, reading the Bible, seeing what he's called us to be, when we equip ourselves with truth, he gives us power to do things in his name. The word apostle can mean a messenger. The word messenger, as in John 13:16, referral to he who is sent. They are called disciples in Matthew 10:1 and apostles in Matthew 10:2. It is a worthy to notice that those who were Christ's apostles were first his disciples. To get intimate with him and know Jesus and know who he was, they were disciples. They were learners of him, and they learned about him and saw his ways, saw his heart, and then they became apostles, and then they were sent out. So there was a transformation process, a internship type process, if you would, of being transformed and coming to a new way of life, a new way of thinking, a new way of doing things, and then sent out. 5 through 6, these 12 Jesus sent out with the following instructions: do not go among the Gentiles or enter any town of Samaritans. Go rather to the lost sheep of Israel. Looking at this, Jesus was touring around the region of Galilee, teaching, preaching, and helping needy people with miraculous power in Matthew 4:23. The sending of these 12 was a conscious expanding of the work. Now the work of Jesus was going to be done by many than just Jesus. It would be done by a lot, and they would cover more ground. This is the pattern of the gospel. It is for the Jew first and also for the Greek in Romans 1:16. Later, the gospel would go to both the Samaritans and the Gentiles, but it had to begin with the lost sheep, from the house of Israel. God's intention was to reach the whole world, but beginning with Israel. There was certainly enough work to do among the lost sheep of the house of Israel. They had turned away, a lot of them, to keep the 12 busy until God directly commanded them to expand their ministry. Significantly, Jesus still called the Jewish people the house of Israel, even though they had lost their Jewish state many decades before this time. God still saw them as Israel, even when there was not a political entity known with Israel at that time. 7 through the first part of A, as you go, proclaim this message: the kingdom of heaven has come near. Heal the sick, raise the dead, cleanse those who have leprosy, drive out demons. Looking at this, earlier in Matthew 4:17, we were told that Jesus' message was repent and the kingdom of heaven is at hand. The disciples brought the same message Jesus preached, simply bringing it over a much broader area than Jesus could have done by himself as a human being. There is no mention of them preaching in synagogues, only being scoffed in them from Matthew 10:17. This was a house-to-house, open field, street preaching type of ministry. The disciples both had a message to preach and a power to display. In this, they were true followers of their master. Looking at verse 8, the last part of 8 through 15. Freely you have received, freely you give. Do not get any gold or silver or copper to take with you in your belts. No bag for the journey, or extra shirt and sandals, or a staff, for the worker is worth his keep. Whatever town or village you enter, search there for some worthy person and stay at their house until you leave. As you enter the house, give it your greetings. If the home is deserving, let your peace rest on it. If it is not, let your peace return to you. If anyone will not welcome you or listen to your words, leave that home or town and shake the dust off your feet. Truly, I tell you, it will be more bearable for Sodom and Gomorrah on the day of judgment than for that town. Now, looking at these scriptures, Jesus charged his disciples nothing, and he expected them to give ministry to others without a charge. This is the foundational principle for the commands that are following. They should expect God to meet their needs without taking a pay to supply their needs. It made them rely totally on the Lord for supplying every need they had. When they came among others, they were to be workers among them. They would work among them in both spiritual work and practical work. We can imagine that them preaching the word of God, praying for and with the people, and helping them with farm work as they go. Even though the 12 could expect their needs to be met, through the people they served, they could never require their needs to be met as payment. The foundational principle was freely you have received and freely you give. Those who did receive these principles can expect to be blessed. Let your peace come upon them, go upon the household. But those places that refuse them could expect to be treated as Gentile cities, to shake the dust off their feet. And as such, we're in serious danger of judgment. Looking at 16 through 18. I am sending you out like sheep among wolves. Therefore, be as shrew as snakes and as innocent as doves. Be on your guard. You will be handed over to the local councils and be flogged in the synagogues. On my account, You will be brought before governors and kings as witnesses to them and to the Gentiles. Looking at these verses, Jesus freely and honestly warned his disciples about the persecution they were going to face because they went out without police or military protection. He sent them as sheep in the midst of wolves. Despite their vulnerable position, Jesus' followers were not to defend themselves with worldly forms of power. They were to remain harmless as doves, those wise as serpents. Jesus also warned them that men would persecute them in the civic areas and also within the religious areas of the synagogue. They would expect opposition from both the city people and the halls of the church religion. This was a remarkable statement recognizing the great influence the gospel and its preachers would have. Governors and kings would notice them and arrest them and bring them to trial. Because they were persecuted for Jesus' sake, they could be a testimony to the people that they were brought into contact with, the religious leaders or the civic leaders. So even by the persecution that he's telling them they're going to bear, they're going to stand, they're going to face, that it will bring about a testimony of Jesus to those people. Looking at verses 19 through 20. But when they arrest you, do not worry about what to say or how to say it. At that time you will be given what to say, for it will not be you speaking, but the Spirit of your Father speaking through you. Looking at those two verses, Jesus' disciples could have a perfect trust in God in that moment, knowing that he would speak through them, even if they were unprepared. It was not the humiliation which early church Christians dreaded, not even the cruel pain and the agony, but many of them feared that their own unskillfulness, their own unpreparedness, their own, the human part of it, just feeling like they couldn't do what Jesus did, in words and defense, they would not be able to defend it properly, might injure rather than condemn the truth, than commend the truth. It is the promise of God that when a man is on trial for his faith, the words will come to him. That's a quote by Barclay. This gave them confidence that the Spirit of the Father would speak to and through them at the necessary moment in time, even if they were not prepared with a statement. So it's a big promise from the Lord. 21 through 23. Brother will betray brother to death, and father his child. Children will rebel against their parents and have them put to death. You will be hated by everyone because of me, but the one who stands firm in the end will be saved. When you are persecuted in one place, flee to another. Truly I tell you, you will not finish going through the towns of Israel before the Son of Man comes. So looking at all of this, Jesus knew that in some cases the gospel would divide families and the members. It would divide people against each other, and that some of the most bitter persecution would take place within family members. And we can see probably many people can attest to that even today. Jesus plainly said that the persecution would sometimes result in death. Though most Christians have endured persecution in economic and social arenas through the centuries, literally millions have given their lives in faithfulness to Jesus. At times, this has been true when the entire cultures have hated the followers of Jesus. It seems strange that people would live by the kingdom expectations found in Matthew 5 through 7. Should be so greatly hated, but it is the same paradox that inspired the world to condemn and crucify the only sinless man to ever live. They were persecuted. They will persecute you in the city. Flee to another. In this, Jesus taught his disciples that it was wrong for them to court martyrdom, not to just go seek it out. If it happens, it happens. But he's telling them that they were not to run towards persecution, or even if they had the chance for an honorable escape, then they should take it and they should flee. You will not have gone through the cities of Israel before the Son of Man comes. This is one of the hardest to understand statements of Jesus in Matthew. Could Jesus really mean he would return to earth before the disciples would make it through the cities of Israel? If so, this would make Jesus plainly wrong in his prediction. Instead, it is better to see his coming in this passage as his coming in judgment upon Judea in AD 70, which did happen before the gospel came to every city in Israel. This is the fulfillment of the day of judgment warned of in Matthew 10:15, Carson says. In many ways, the judgment poured out by God upon Judea throughout the Roman armies in AD 70 was worse than the judgment that would come upon Sodom and Gomorrah. When they face persecution, they must take it as no more than a signal of strategic withdrawal to the next city, where witness must continue, for the time is short. They will not have finished evangelizing the cities of Israel before the Son of Man comes in judgment on Israel. 24 through 25. The student is not above the teacher, nor a servant above his master. It is enough for students to be like their teachers and servants like their masters. If the head of the house has been called Beelzebul, how much more the members of this household? Looking at this quickly, simply put, the disciples should not expect to be treated any better than Jesus was treated. And Jesus was crucified. He was hung on a cross and tortured. And we shouldn't expect to be treated much better. He was mocked, laughed at, and so much more. This is the goal of both the disciple and the servant of Jesus. We simply want to be like our teacher and master as we are conformed to the image of his Son, and he might be the firstborn among many brethren. Romans 8:29. 26 through 31. So do not be afraid of them, for there is nothing concealed that will not be disclosed, or hidden that will not be made known. When I tell you in the dark, speak in the daylight. What is whispered in your ear, proclaim from the roofs. Do not be afraid of those who kill the body, but cannot kill the soul. Rather be afraid of the one who can destroy both soul and body in hell. And not 2 sparrows sold for a penny. Yet not one of them will fall to the ground outside your Father's care, and even the very hairs on your head are numbered. So don't be afraid. You are worth much more than sparrows. Looking at those scriptures, Jesus' disciples could have confidently that the truth would prevail. They could proclaim that. They knew that. So they should go out and preach it with boldness despite the dangers of persecution, and that applies to us as well. Jesus promised his persecuted followers that the truth of their honorable sacrifice would be known. Even if the persecutors did their best to hide it among the pages of history, God would reveal all and justify his servants and reveal the crime of those who thought they had hidden it. The message of Jesus was gloriously public. It was not for a secret few and was not to be hidden in any way. This isn't one message for an inner circle and another for those on the outside. Those on the outside may not understand the message, but they can hear it, and it is not to be hidden from them. Jesus' disciples didn't need to be afraid because God really did care for them, even down to the most minuscule detail of the number of hairs on our heads. 32 through 39, whoever acknowledges me before others, I will also acknowledge before my Father in heaven. But whoever disowns me before others, I will disown before my Father in heaven. Do not suppose that I have come to bring peace to the earth. I did not come to bring peace, but a sword, for I have come to turn a man against his father, a daughter against his mother, a daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law, and man's enemies will be the members of his household. Anyone who loves their father or mother more than me is not worthy of me. Anyone who loves their son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. Whoever does not take up their cross and follow me is more worthy of me. is not worthy of me. Whoever finds their life will lose it. Whoever loses their life for my sake will find it. Looking at this, the disciples must confess Jesus publicly before men. If we will not be public about our allegiance to him, he cannot we cannot expect him to be public with his allegiance to us. Everyone Jesus called, he called publicly. There is really no such thing as a secret Christian. It's really an oxymoron. The message of Jesus as reflected in the Sermon on the Mount is indeed a message of peace. Yet since it calls the individual to radical commitment to Jesus himself, it is a message of peace that divides between those who choose it and those who reject it. The division between these two choices explain how Jesus did not come to bring peace, but he came to bring a sword. The disciples must follow Jesus even to the place of taking his cross. When a person took a cross in Jesus' day, they knew what it meant. They knew it meant to die. They knew it meant to the death. His cross, your cross, isn't really your particular trial or trouble. The cross means one thing. It means death, death to self, but resurrection, life in Jesus. This is the first mention of the cross in Matthew's gospel, and it is not directly associated with Jesus' own crucifixion. Such an extreme statement, likening discipleship with the horror of crucifixion, something too terrible to be mentioned in polite company, must have jarred the disciples. Yet they knew what the cross was about. They knew what crucifixion was about. They knew what was being said here. The disciples live in a paradox. He can only find life by losing it, and he can only live by dying. Resurrection life can only come after we take up our cross and follow Jesus. Looking at 40 through 42, anyone who welcomes you welcomes me, and anyone who welcomes me welcomes the one who sent me. Whoever welcomes a prophet as a prophet will receive a prophet's reward, and whoever welcomes a righteous person as a righteous person will receive a righteous person's reward. And if anyone gives even a cup of water to one of these little ones who is my disciple, truly I tell you that person will certainly not lose their reward. Looking at these last couple of scriptures for this chapter, the good done to Jesus' disciples is as if it were good done to Jesus himself, because they are his representatives carrying on his ministry. We can share in the reward of God's servants by supporting them in their work. Even seemingly insignificant works of kindness, like giving someone a cold drink of water, performed for God's people, are meaningful in God's sight, and he rewards it. What could seem more insignificant than giving a person a cup of cold water? In a short time, they will be thirsty again. Yet even such a small gesture will always be remembered and rewarded by God. They shall by no means lose their reward. All right, so that is all for our daily devotion for the day. And tomorrow we'll be going over Matthew chapter 11. I hope to see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.